Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at the Thule TracRac Ladder Rack on a 2021 Toyota Tacoma. Now you're going to see it has this nice gray powder coat finish, so it does give it a really clean look, but if you want something maybe a little sporty or stealthier looking, it's also available in black. Now traditional ladder racks are not going to work in this kind of bed because of that rail system, and that's where Thule has made these brackets that fit perfectly in there. And something else that's nice is with these brackets there's provisions to actually have a toolbox in here as well, so you can still have your in-bed toolbox along with your ladder rack. Now you can see here that it does sit above the roof line, so that's going to be great for things that extend out, and in fact a lot of places with beaches you'll see a lot of surfboards on here. Now if you're doing heavy equipment, whether it be lumber or maybe some roofing or whatever things might be long, you're going to want to look at the Cantilever Addition onto this, and that's going to allow it a little more support over the cab of the vehicle to put those longer items on there and know that they're secure. So speaking of that cab clearance and being higher than the roof line, let's take a look here at the highest point, which is going to be our antenna on the roof to the top of the bar. It's going to put us right at about 4 inches. So you're safely above your roof. As long as things aren't drooping down or hanging down, you should be fine and it won't make contact with your roof. So keep in mind that you are adding at least 4 inches just with the rails above your truck, and anything that you put on top of that, whether it be these load stops or the actual load that you're carrying, that's going to add height to the vehicle. So be careful if you're used to maybe a low garage or something. You are adding height to your vehicle and you don't want to make contact with your new accessory. And the load stops are also included with this, so that's going to be really nice to be able to adjust pretty quickly to whatever you're carrying on here. And also you're going to see these little hooks. That's going to be nice for tying it all off, and you have a nice hooking point here. So that way whatever you load up, you can cinch that up to whatever size you need and also know that it's secure by strapping it down. Now the rack actually stays on with this nice long bracket, and you have your clamps here that go into this track, and it's going to cinch this down, but there's also a nice rubber pad here, so that's going to prevent any scratching on your plastic here. So even if long term you decide that you don't need this rack anymore, you can take this off and it's not going to leave any permanent marks on your vehicle. Now the entire rack is made out of aluminum, so it's pretty lightweight yet extremely sturdy. In fact, this is capable of carrying 800 pounds, so you'll be able to load up quite a bit on here. So it's great for your work truck, or maybe you overlanders if you need to mount up maybe a rooftop tent. This is going to support that pretty easily. These bars are going to be 65 inches wide, so that really opens up a lot of real estate. In fact, it opens up even a little bit more than your normal bed would be. Now you don't want to put stuff extreme on the ends here, but really this is great because not only can you retain the use of your bed, but you can store longer things that would typically be hanging out of your tailgate. And installation is also extremely easy, and I'm going to walk you through that. So let's take a look at that now. To begin our installation, we're going to want to lay everything out. There's quite a bit of hardware here, and so I'm actually using a muffin tin that I've put magnets on below, and really this is just to kind of organize out my hardware. It's going to make it a lot easier grabbing the parts that you need. So if you have cups or any kind of way to organize your hardware, I highly suggest that. And then from there, we're going to be assembling it off the vehicle and then putting it on. So I'm going to show you the first step here. You're going to see we have our bar, has our decal. You're going to want that facing out, and that direction you're going to see this rail here. This is actually going to sit on the bed just like that, so you're going to want the decal facing this way. So we'll go ahead and we're going to take a 7/32 Allen. If you have an Allen wrench, that works great. If you have a drill, you're going to be using this quite a bit, so if you have that, you're going to want to get that attachment. But we'll go ahead, get these kind of in place here. It's kind of nice, they are pre-thread locked here, so that's kind of nice from the factory. You don't have to worry about putting any thread locker on there. So once I kind of have those in place, I'll go ahead and tighten them down. Now we're also going to be going back with our torque wrench to make sure that they're properly torqued down. So you're also going to want to have this on hand. Now if you don't have a torque wrench, we have these here at eTrailer, or you can generally rent them at an auto parts store. So go ahead and get your torque wrench, and you're going to want to set that to the manufacturer's recommendations in the instructions, and then we'll go through and torque these down. So now we'll be taking our top plate, and this is where the bars are actually going to go across, and we're going to put this on top. Now the orientation, you're going to see that it is kind of angled, and really what you're going to be looking for is that these are parallel. So you can see right here the angle that this will sit on the bed, so I'll just kind of straighten that out for you. You're going to want this to sit where this is parallel, so that is incorrect. You're going to want to flip it around, make sure that that is lined up, and then you're good to go. So same thing, you have the same hardware. We're going to put these in, tighten them down, and then torque them just like we did on the bottom. So now you're going to want to repeat this same process on the remaining 3, and that way we have 4 of these ready to go. So now that we have all of our uprights installed or put together like this, we're going to go ahead and grab our button head screws. We're also going to have these square nuts. Now, square nuts, you're going to see there is a beveled edge here, and then it's flat on the bottom. So it is important to actually feed them to have this flat side going towards our mount here. And this is where our cross member is going to actually go across and lock into these channels. So having that flat side down is going to help press that and tighten it into place. So go ahead and get all this hardware at least hand tightened on there, and then after that we'll come back and get our crossbar assembled on these. So now we're going to grab 2 of our uprights that are side specific, and you're going to see on the bottom base there's a little letters. You have LFRR, so that'll be your left front or your right rear, and this one is going to be right front or left rear. So you're going to want to make sure that these kind of match up. And the way I'm going to do that is just kind of lay this out on how it's going to sit in the bed and just kind of make sure that it makes sense. You can see that these kind of sitting level, these are also sitting level, so that way our crossbar will actually slide onto that. Now speaking of, you're going to want to grab your crossbar as we're going to slide this on here. So I have my crossbar here, and you're going to see this is different. It's not, the shape obviously is irregular, it's not symmetrical, so you're going to see a smaller slot and then this larger slot. Well, this larger slot is what's actually going to fit those square nuts through it, so this is going to be our bottom. So pretty easy. What I'll be doing here, I know that this is going to go on this end, so I can simply slide this onto our crossbar. You know, just feed those square nuts through that channel. And then we're also going to do the same with the other one, and that way we can kind of get it aligned up before we tighten these down. So a good rule of thumb, just to make sure that you have the proper orientation, the decals should be facing the outside when it's all said and done. So while I have this upside down, loading this in, I pretty much know that I can put this side and this will just kind of flip over and it should all be in place. So this long portion on the front rail here, it's going to face towards the middle, and then on the back it's going to face also facing towards the cab. So they kind of both point towards the middle. So take that into account as well. So I have this one here. Once we put the other one on, this will actually go on our front, and that's going to be the proper setup for it. Now that we have both uprights in place, before we tighten this down, we're going to want to actually put it on the truck and make sure that it's all spaced out properly. So with an extra set of hands, go ahead and take your rail. We'll just flip this. Now you're going to see that little edge here on our bracket is going to sit in the bed channel. And you can actually still move these because they are loose. So you're going to want to find that perfect spot to where this is sitting back against the bed, but also tight against the side. And then you can see our top is actually a little bit crooked. So our final thing that we'll do is take a tape measure, measure each side, make sure that it's aligned properly and centered up, and then we can tighten down our hardware. Now you're going to see on the bracket here there is this gap, and that's for the shims to go on, and this is going to kind of just smooth this out but also give it a nice bite onto the bed. So what I'll do here is I'm just going to kind of slide this in place pretty easy, and it does come flush here. You're going to want to make sure that this is backed up against the bed and against the side. We'll go ahead and put the shim on the other side as well. So now we're going to grab our brackets here. Now these are going to be specific to the Tacoma and the fact that these are going to slide in this channel. So our clamps that we had that came with the kit that look like this, they're not going to work just because there's really no way for these to clamp on. So what I've realized is some of the powder coat finish on this clamp actually has some buildup on the threads. So you can try to hand tighten it. If it's giving you any resistance, I suggest kind of running this through with a power tool. That's going to make it a lot easier when it comes time to actually tighten this down. You're not going to be fumbling with a hand tool. Now if it goes through by hand, that's awesome. Now something we want to do though is we're going to put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads, and that's just going to make sure that this doesn't seize up long term, being out in the elements, and that way if we ever need to remove our rack or adjust it, we're not stuck with a stripped out head on a bolt or a thread that's not going to move. So we're going to go ahead and we'll just take a little bit of our anti-seize and place this on just like that, kind of just paint it on a little bit. Don't have to get too crazy. Now if you don't have anti-seize, we actually have this here at eTrailer, and if you've ever used it before and it's saved you from one bolt seizing up, it is well worth doing. It's a good step. So let's just kind of get an idea here. This will slide in and you're going to see this hole that's on the inside. That's going to actually be where this bolt runs up. So I'm going to just kind of hand thread this in. And then you have this plate, and that's just, the bolt's going to kind of sit in here. And as we tighten this, this is going to give us that tension to clamp this in place. But we're going to want to make sure that we actually have our clamp in place before tightening down. So what I'm going to do here is just slide this in. You know, make sure that you have these out, and we're just going to work our way down. You may have to shimmy it here and there as there's little notches in the bed. And then once we have that in place, I can go ahead, put the clamp on top where the bolt is, and then I'm just going to kind of hand tighten this down to kind of get it snug for us. So we're going to get that kind of tightened up, not completely tight to where it can't move, but we're going to want this to sit as far forward as possible. And then we're going to repeat that same process, sliding it here, keeping it far back as possible. And that's going to kind of distribute the weight over this bracket, giving us the highest weight capacity and keeping this balanced. So now with our second bracket clamping down here in place, we're going to go ahead and repeat the same process on the other side. So now I have 4 brackets in place and I haven't tightened them down. And what you're going to want to check a few things before doing that. You're going to want to make sure that this rubber spacer here is sitting nice underneath where you want it on the actual bracket here. You also want to make sure that this is pressed up as far up on the bed here. You're going to see that little channel actually gives it a perfect home there. And then also you're going to want to make sure that it's actually spread out all the way, and make sure that this is going to be a nice tight fit. So when actually tightening these down, I suggest keeping a little bit of pressure in place so that bracket doesn't move. And then we'll go ahead and we'll tighten these up just a little bit just so it doesn't move, but we're going to need to go back with a torque wrench and get proper specs on that. So go ahead and get these a little snug down. Now this torque setting that we're using is going to be different than our previous ones that we've done. So you're going to want to make sure you check your instruction manual to get that proper setting for this hardware. It's going to be kind of tricky to get into this angle, but you should be able to. There we go. Something else to note is the feet that are in here, you're going to want to make sure those are sitting parallel with the actual rail here, and that way it's getting the most contact patch. So when you're tightening it down, they may want to move a little bit, but that's okay. You can just loosen it back up. And that's going to allow me to kind of move this back. And I'll just hold it with my fingers while I tighten this down. So now that we have our front rail essentially installed, we're going to want to make sure that we put these in place because we'll be putting our back ones in, and you want to make sure that these are in place before you get that bracket in, otherwise they're going to be really tricky. So go ahead and put these back. Now the back is going to go on pretty much the same. There's going to be a few things that vary, and I'm going to show you those now. One of them being, you're going to want to make sure that you slide your brackets on first before placing this on. And you're going to see on the bed of the Tacoma, it actually tends to taper off once it gets closer to the bed. So that kind of makes it a little awkward for this to clamp on unless you move the whole upright forward. So now you can see that taper begin here. So what we've done is move the upright as far back to where it's still flat there. And then then we've had our bracket pushed back as far as we can, and we can see we still have a space here to still get our clip on. So you're going to want to make sure that you account for that. And then once you have that in place, you can tighten that up. And this one we've just kind of pushed out flush with the end to give it a nice wider spread. Now, something else that you're going to want to keep in mind is the way that the crossbar is actually mounted onto the upright, and this is a good chance to check it before tightening it down. So seeing the shape of this cross tube here, you're going to want to make sure that this half moon kind of shape is actually facing towards the cab, and that's going to be the same on both of them. So it's pretty easy to flip them 180, and it is going to go together, but this is the proper way to do it. Now, when you tighten these brackets down, you're going to want to make sure that you have a minimum of 3-inch spread here, and again, that's to disperse the weight. So moving it out to this far end is going to work out great for us. Now, you are going to lose a little bit of adjustability here with your tie downs in the bed, but that's kind of unfortunately one of the things that you'll have to take into account. Now, another thing before tightening down that I did was also just measure between the two brackets on each side and make sure that those are actually matching. That way we know that they're parallel. So now we're going to put our load stops in place, and you're going to see there's this T bolt here, and this is going to just slide in our channel, and that's going to feed through here, and then we'll have our handle. We also have this channel here on the back side that's actually fused into this, so you're going to want to make sure that you get both of those aligned. So I'm just going to hold that as I slide this in place. You have to kind of wiggle it around a little bit before getting that in the channel, but that should go on. And then you can simply put this little turn knob here. You can adjust wherever you want. And then when you're at the spot that you like, just simply crank down that hand knob a little bit, and that's going to hold in place. So now we're going to repeat that same process with our other 3 load stops. So now we still have these screws that are going to be a little bit loose, and I'm going to check our measurements on the outside of the bracket to the end of the actual crossbar, and that way it's going to be centered up. So getting measurements on both sides, we'll try to match those, and then we can tighten it in place. Got my measurements all squared up, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down. Now I'm also going to go back with my torque wrench and make sure that they're at the proper torque settings. So now for a little bit of the finishing touch, our end cap is going to go into place, and pretty simple here. It's just going to sit right there. You have a hole that this is threaded. So we have our stainless hardware here, and we're going to be putting that in place. Now this is a 3/16 bit. I'm also going to make sure that I put anti-seize on these as well. Now we'll go ahead and repeat that same process. So now with all our end caps on, everything tightened and torqued to the proper specs, we're ready to load up our lumber, ladder, or whatever you need to on our rack. And that was a look and installation of the Thule TracRac Ladder Rack on a 2021 Toyota Tacoma. Thanks for watching.